Founding member and leader of the Freedom Alliance, Johnathan Till is now coordinator at the Vote Freedom Project, which supports independent candidates in elections with the goal of restoring freedom, rejecting corruption and rescuing democracy. Johnathan.
Thank you. Could I just start by checking how many people have heard me talk before? Just give me a guide as to... Okay, not too many then, so you'll get the full life history, I'm afraid. If everybody put their hands up, I would have skipped out that bit. I mean, in the before times, and I have to thank Sean for that phrase, in the before times I would have counted myself as a member of the real right, as a sort of card-carrying libertarian. And therefore it's always a great pleasure to come and talk with the real left. Personally, I think the whole right-left thing is part of the control mechanism, and I would hope that it is going or is gone, but the experience of campaigning for the third election cycle over the last 4 weeks is that it hasn't gone. People do use those identities, and that's that's why it's important that that I come here and speak with you, because I think the left has got a really important role to play in what happens next. So as we sort of transition from the sprint that we thought we were all in 2020 to the sort of marathon that we're running now, I'm being very much more selective with my time and where I go to speak and what events I go to. But I will always come to the real left because I think it is vital as we go forward. My background, I mean, I wasn't really involved in politics at all before 2020. I was an accountant and then an acupuncturist, which gave me two sort of handles on what went on in 2020. I've always had an interest in monetary history. What is money? Who creates money? How money is used to control us? And obviously I have an angle on how the pharmaceutical industry makes us ill and makes profits from making us ill. My particular bugbear prior to 2020 wasn't it was more statins, to be honest. That's what I was evangelical about, if anything. But I since childhood times, so that's where I stand on that. I set up a political party, Freedom Alliance, with one or two others in West Yorkshire as 2020 sort of kicked off, and I thought that we'd got to do something to resist what was happening. We'd got to, the sharing and the working and the building the networks was all important, but we'd actually got to kick back in some way, and elections, flawed and not great as they are, still gave us one opportunity to at least platform freedom and to try and use it as a mechanism to communicate with the wider public what we believe and what we know is going on. I did that initially through a political party, then the penny dropped that we would be better doing it as independents. One, because the whole notion of a political party is still very much part of the control, top-down, centralised mechanism that they like to use, and is very easy to capture and infiltrate. So independence fits better with the freedom community, and but the other thing about independence is people are more willing to vote for them, and I've demonstrated that myself personally by trebling my vote in the little ward Denby Dale in Kirklees, where I've stood this time, trebling it as an independent rather than as a Freedom Alliance candidate, and most of the people that stood who'd previously been party candidates did the same. So there's a definite appetite out there for voting for independence. Right, in terms of where I think we are, I mean, I always probably tend to be slightly more towards the sort of optimistic spectrum here, because I think our enemies are absolutely panicking. I don't think this is choreographed. I don't think it's as controlled as we think it is, and I don't think they're getting to where they want to be. I mean, they didn't obviously get there with the with the control method. I mean, it was clearly have a fake to lead to a fake to lead into the the digital IDs and the digital money, and we stopped them. Us collectively, the 15% or whatever it was. I mean, we can debate and argue about the figure, but however many it was, those that didn't take the so-called stop them, because they were hoping it would be 2 or 3% and they could marginalise them and cut them out of society, and eventually those people would have to fold. And by just saying no, just standing up and just not complying, we stopped them at stage 2. Basically, they didn't get past that, so they've backed off now, and they're now trying to do it in a more sort of covert and subtle way, I think, with all the stuff that Emily's talked about. I think we already live in a highly controlled society. I think they have used debt-based money to control us, to already herd us into occupation zones. Okay, they're not the same as the 20-minute cities that are coming, but there are regulations about where you can live already and where you can be and where you can go. And I think the best analogy I've heard is, we're on a farm already, a tax farm if you like, but we're free-range humans at the minute, and we're moving towards a model of battery-farmed humans, and that's essentially what we're doing. But I think their existing control mechanism, which is based around the issuance of debt and then the use of that debt as money, turning it into currency, is collapsing. And they know it's collapsing. And every empire in history has collapsed for this same reason, which is that you can only create so much, and at some point the stuff becomes worthless, which represents itself through inflation, which is obviously what we're getting now. The inflation is coming because they've created too much money, and that is the end of their control system, and they know it. And the first clue to this, the first thing that happened in September 2019, they lost control of interest rates only overnight in New York. It was only fairly briefly, but I think they absolutely panicked at that point and rushed forward plan, which probably wasn't meant for 5 or 10 years anyway, to try and introduce their new digital control mechanism, because that's what they want. They want the digital control to replace the debt-based control, because they know the debt-based control is dying, it's at the end of the road, and the minute that's gone, they have lost power. What replaces it is the role of all of us lot to try and decide and define and decipher and implement. But so their existing system of control is dying, and they are desperately trying to put in place this digital control mechanism. Which I mean, I think they're panicking. I think they're rushing. I don't think the technology is even ready yet. I'm not the world's greatest technical expert by any means, but it looks to me, and culturally, we're not ready for it yet. People are not ready to stop using their cars or to have mileage allowances or whatever. Society isn't ready, which is why they've got to be very covert and go underneath the radar. And my little leaflet in Denby Dale, I put on the back of it, I was trying to be not as in your face as usual, but I put in, I will resist 15-minute cities or 15-minute zones, because I don't live in a city. And I had a lot of people come up to me and say, well, what are these 15-minute zones? What are you talking about? And the minute you explain, just the look of, the blood drains from their face, the look of horror. And that's our job, for me, is to use elections to do that, to have those conversations, to say, this is what's coming, this is what they're trying to do. Because it is, Kirklees have got their zero carbon plan or whatever. I think we're lined up for Liverpool neighbourhoods like Glasgow by the sounds of it, because the terminology, there's 3 or 4 different types, but they keep popping back up. Whereas Barnsley, where I work, I think they're having urban villages or something. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? We know what it is. But if you put I'm campaigning against urban villages, people will say, what are you talking about? I want to live in an urban village. So we have to use the opportunity to explain, to platform, because we can win this. Once people understand what is planned, nobody, whether the right, left or whatever, nobody's up for this stuff. It is a tiny number of psychopaths, globalist billionaires who have captured and controlled governments. And that's where we get back to the right-left divide, which I will come back to. But governments are basically just a tool of the global corporatists at the minute. We differ on the terms of capitalism. I don't think we're living in a capitalistic society. I think we're living in a corrupt corporatist society, essentially. But global capitalism, I would accept as an evil. But what they've done, and this is the mistake, the trap we walked into with Freedom Alliance, what they've done is they've managed to badge the word freedom as essentially being a right-wing concept. And a far-right concept, a neo-Nazi concept. I've been called such things. Sue has been a candidate for independent candidate for Vote Freedom this time. We are defending our freedom to move, our freedom to think, our freedom of speech, our freedom to decide how we bring up our children, medical freedom. Defending those is not a selfish right-wing concept. I mean, it's essentially the freedoms that are outlined in the Human Rights Act, which a left-wing government brought in. So that is where we need the people that would see themselves as on the left, is to try and neutralise that notion that fighting this is somehow a selfish, right-wing, whatever concept, because we need the environmental movement to wake up, and we need the socialist movement to wake up and to realise that this is not for their benefit. This is not for the greater good. It is for the good of a tiny minority of people who want to control us. Right. So I mean, where do we go next? What can we do? We will continue to work with Vote Freedom Project that we've set up. We had several hundred people use us. I mean, we don't have candidates because we're not a political party, but we had several hundred people use the resources that we provide to stand themselves this year. We provide assistance, help, guidance, but essentially what we're doing is setting people up to stand for local elections and also parliamentary elections when there's a general election. And I potentially probably will stand for the West Yorkshire mayor election when that comes up next year as well. So we're using every time there's an election to platform what we believe in, what we want to see, and ultimately to try and get into these, particularly the councils, because this, as Emily and Tamora were both saying, this is all implemented through councils. It's not, a lot of this isn't coming through Westminster. They just completely bypassed it. They've captured the councils, particularly the big city councils. And that's where they're implementing it. So the best place to be to try and at least initially frustrate some of this stuff is in those council chambers as a councillor, and we've got to start to get people elected. And the massive frustration for me is we have the numbers. There's 15-20%, I think, across the country who you can say are safely on our side. They didn't have they're fully awake, to use the terminology. But none of us, either as independents or freedom parties, are getting 15% of the vote. And we're not getting it because the freedom movement makes a virtue out of not voting. And that is our number one problem. We need people to come forward as candidates, but we need the rest of the people. And it probably isn't the people in this room, because you've made the effort to come here today, to give up your Saturday to come to an event. But we need the people listening on the live stream or wherever this goes out to drop your objections to voting and to elections. They're not brilliant. They're not perfect. There probably are examples of them being rigged in this country. I think they're fairly small and fairly few and far between. But it's not. It is rigged through the control of the media, certainly. But we need to get past that and start to use it, because if we can start to get that 15% of people to back individual pro-freedom, anti-globalist and anti-corporatist candidates, then we will get people elected, and those people can then start to platform. They will get into the media. They will be able to speak our narrative, and we will be able to provide an alternative narrative to the state corporate narrative that is rammed down everybody's throat. And we have got a massive opportunity here. They are going for zero carbon. That's the new zero. But it hasn't got the same traction as it had. It worked on turning fear into a virtue. So they terrified people, but then they were good people because they were staying in the house. They'd stay in the house because they were terrified, but they could make a virtue out of it because they were protecting Granny and all the rest of it. Zero carbon doesn't do that. The thing is a fraud and a con. Temperatures are decreasing, and they measure them from a high point in 1860 and a low point in 1860 and all the rest of it. But even if it was a thing, nobody's scared of it enough. They're not terrified of something that might happen 30, 50, 100 years' time. Not terrified enough to give up their cars, to give up their foreign holidays, which, again, was one of the lessons, the ability of the state to bribe people with the prospect of going on holiday if you'd had your... this is you losing your opportunity to go on holiday if you sign up to the zero carbon nonsense. So we have got a massive open goal with zero carbon, because the population, not just our people, but the population, I believe, once they have the facts put in front of them, will agree with us and will fight alongside us. But we've got to put in place the facilities, the structures, the candidates, the people campaigning behind the candidates to be able to do that. Peace is another thing I think is particularly important from a left-wing perspective. Ultimately, as they lose control of the monetary system, they will go to backing it by gold at the end of the day. It is the only option that will be left to them, and they will hate to do that because they will lose the ability to create money at will to back whatever they want to do. So that's why they want the digital control in place, so that they've got a control mechanism that doesn't require them to spend vast sums of money. But ultimately, as the thing, as they really lose control, I suspect they will try and kick off a world war. I mean, they will turn Putin or whoever into the bogeyman. Has in essence already done that, and we're going to need a really active peace movement to say we don't do wars. And that again is where those that would see themselves on the left, I think, have got a really, really vital role to play, because we don't have that much. I mean, that much of a peace movement left anymore. It's not like the 1980s, is it? There aren't. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I wouldn't be somebody that says all war is terrible. War is terrible, but war is never justified. But I would line up behind a peace movement now, because they are going to use war as the next control mechanism, and we've got to be ready to say no, not in our name. Would be my argument. So I'll take questions at the end, but please don't be too dismissive about elections. They're not perfect. I don't particularly want to be doing this. I was quite happy with my life in the before times, and I'm quite happy to go back there. But it's not an option. That's not however much they dupe us into believing that we're back in in the old normal. We're not. They are subtly and slowly moving us towards the new normal because their panicked, quick attempt to do that through completely failed, I believe, and this will fail if we get the same activity and the same energy that we had in 2021. If we get that back, we can defeat them. I'm confident of that. So I'll end on that slightly more positive note.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. It's just always does the spirit good to be reminded that the ruling class are panicking and they don't have all the answers and they're omnipotent and we've got more power than them. It's obvious, but it needs restating, so it's a great, positive, optimistic note to conclude on.